It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome to the floor Professor Evelyne Bischof, longevity physician at Human Longevity, who will be speaking on clinical applications of aging and their role in longevity medicine. Evelyne, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. The floor is yours.
So once again, thank you very much for having me. And it's a great pleasure to talk today about the clinical application of the human biomarkers of aging and their role in longevity medicine. That was the title that I chose, probably a little bit unfortunate because being in such a panel with so much of vigor and enthusiasm, which is absolutely correct and which we are living also every day, my topic will probably bring a little bit more of a duster part, meaning what is happening at the end chain of human biomarkers of aging and their actual application in a daily life on patients. And as a disclaimer on myself, I'm an internal medicine doctor besides of being a longevity concierge doctor. So I am with one of my feet also still in the academic setting of an university hospital, currently here in China, pretty much still in the setting of internal medicine and also intensive care. So seeing longevity medicine and the rapid development of this fantastic field, and I hope soon to also be a new discipline of medicine, I also see what is going on in the traditional part of medicine, in the reactive part of medicine. And I'm always wondering, how can we bring both together? How can we implement more of the longevity medicine, especially the measurements of the biomarkers of aging in the clinic, in the actual current clinic, because this will, at the end of the day, perpetuate the field of longevity medicine and ultimately bring benefit to a number of stakeholders, not only individuals, but also population, nations, and so on. So what is longevity medicine? I think there is no definition that is written in stone. We've tried to at least give a little bit of a guidance in our recent paper with Professor Źawronkov and Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, the father of AI, basically defining the longevity medicine as a branch of precision medicine that is specifically focused on promoting the healthy lifespan, so the health span and the lifespan powered by AI technology. And we are looking at in longevity medicine, as opposed to traditional medicine, is the following. So in our traditional view of medicine, not in traditional Chinese medicine, but in a traditional view of medicine, we are following the patient's journey along the lifespan. And we are usually seeing that patients at different types of ages, so being in the children part, in adolescents, then at the peak of their performance, they are being accompanied by physicians that have, of course, a limited scope of expertise, but what is even more important, they have right now tools that are allowing them to look only at a very specific range of people, or populations that are falling into the same age range. So bottom line, we in the clinic, in a normal clinic, we are looking at ranges for a specific group of chronological age, because this is what we have been taught. This is what we are basing our evidence on, the randomized controlled trials. So this is the old school. And what is the problem here? Even if we would change the chronological scale axis to biological axis, this would still leave us at looking as a doctor at the range of the patient's age compared to the population, and dealing with the patient, usually helping as a reactive medicine when the diagnosis of some sort of disease is there, or even at the early prevention, but still looking only at the frame of that person. In longevity medicine, the goal is a little bit different. Here we are looking at the same patient journey. So of course, one of the goals of longevity medicine is to hopefully extend the healthy lifespan, but it's not the primary goal to only extend the lifespan. We already have this with our medicine. The lifespan of humans has been extended and brought with it the problems that we are dealing with, namely the age-related diseases and frailty and so on. So what longevity medicine is doing is to look at the person's range of the optimal performance. So identifying the biological age of a person where he or she can perform best. And the performance is not only the subjective measurement, so it's not only when the patient felt best and so on, but really the best performance also speaking biologically and physiologically, etc. And being now able to process the data with AI, with deep learning, transfer learning, and so on, we can identify at a specific point of time the biological age of a patient, and not only that. So knowing the biological age or knowing something is one thing, and it's very important. And thanks to that, we can now conduct studies that will teach us more and that will ultimately lead to identification of new biomarkers and application of therapeutics. But many patients in longevity practice are asking, all right, so now we have identified the biological age of mine, what next? And the answer is coming exactly from this type of learning, from deep learning, and from the outputs that are being provided, namely, we can now receive from the algorithm an objective measurement of the parameters that have to be optimized and an exact number of how much those parameters have to be optimized to bring the patient from their current state of biological age to their biological age of optimal performance based on the current biological age. So very often a person that is 70 will not have a calculated optimal biological age of 30, but maybe it will be somewhere around 60 or 55. And this is the goal of longevity medicine, to realistically and objectively, with quantifiable biomarkers, bring the patient to the state where he or she can be of optimal performance. In terms of aging, this usually means with no comorbidities and so on. So this brought, of course, the discipline and the field of longevity to be a new reality. And this also brought a new specialty, hopefully soon to be a specialty, of a longevity physician to the state. And it is important to remember that longevity physicians also have their place in the clinic. They are all under Hippocratic oath, and they also have the same goal. They want the optimal health for the patient. However, the way how the data are being curated and analyzed and finally also used and applied in following and leading the patient is very different. So this is why it is so important also now that physicians from different disciplines, since longevity medicine is so extremely inclusive, and I think it's the most inclusive discipline with dermatology and endocrinology and all the other types of disciplines together. It is extremely important that there are sources for the physicians to learn and to become well-trained longevity physicians. Now, longevity medicine is based on two pillars, in my opinion. That's just only how I see it. One is a clinical precision diagnostics, and this is where a lot of things is already happening, and we have all these wonderful tools out there, from monitoring and blood tests and all the other testings of multimodal diagnostics that is out there, more or less accessible, more or less available, but it's out there and it's progressing very rapidly. And then there are longevity interventions, and this is something that is fueled usually by doctors, and of course accelerated by stakeholders and by the patients and their motivation and so on. But this is the arena that is a little bit slower and also a little bit immature. Now, myself, another disclaimer, I'm in China, in Shanghai, and what I have seen here is something that we could see worldwide. AI is definitely transforming the entire world. And we have seen being here, the entire evolution of how AI was changing the world up until the point of 2015 around the deep learning revolution that allowed us longevity physicians now to have the tools that we have. But what is more important, and I'm saying this also in relation to biomarkers, at the end I will say why it's important. So here in China, we have also seen how AI permeates the society and how in waves it came to be that right now we are pretty much living in a whole AI world, up to the point that the autonomous AI took over a lot of branches of life in China. This includes, of course, medicine, up to the point that we have now over 300 purely internet hospitals, and almost all hospitals are going digital. Why is that also important? Because this is also transforming the human intelligence. So also this is transforming the maturity of the population per se, then the patients, on how they perceive longevity, how they perceive AI, and how they perceive AI also in their medical treatment, assessment, screening, and so on. And last but not least, we see that here the number of science is absolutely booming, the number of publications, etc. And this has been ongoing since the early 2010 and so on. So around 2014 already here, we could feel as doctors very much the shift from reactive to proactive medicine, with a lot of telemedicine implementation and a lot of curating of data. Still quite chaotic and discoordinated, but there was already this trend that was ongoing. Then we had the deep learning that came on top, and we were able then to really use some sort of preliminary inputs of objective function and lead to some targeted optimizations of our clinical questions. So what we see now in the past years, and the COVID very much accelerated this, is really the movement not only from reactive to proactive, but from proactive to AI precision medicine, to not only prevent some of the diseases, but really to mitigate, to identify the risk, to mitigate the risks of ever developing the diseases. And this is the trend, and I believe this is something that we will see also globally, or are seeing globally. So I believe most of this development will be at different pace, also in different ways of how it will be done, but also on other continents. Why is it important? Number one, because all of the physicians have pretty much the same goal. They want to optimize patients' health, and this is where a lot also of efforts of other stakeholders are in. But this is also especially very much important because we are looking at the silver tsunami. As we all know, we are having the fastest growing segment of population being the old patients, and they are extremely complex, not only for medicine, but also for society, for politics, and so on. So in terms of biomarkers of aging, there might be, or we might be facing very soon, also an increasing push from the public health and global health and governance sector to support really the actual translation of all those biomarkers that are out there and the measurements that are available into the clinic. And maybe we'll be soon looking at even screening programs for healthy longevity biomarkers, because we will not only want to prevent specific diseases like cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, and so on, but we will probably also want to prevent aging or accelerated aging. And another point is more on an individual level. So people are now more aware that there is a high level of biovariability, and that this biovariability can be measured, and there is an increasing individual demand for curating the data, for sourcing of solutions, and for an actual translation for application of those. And of course, the increasing longevity interest is also perpetuating a field of point of care centers and point of care, up to the point that we have also at home solutions for a lot of data that can be curated by the patient, him or herself. So this is a very positive development. However, it needs the more a coordinated and credible effort of translation. And this can and should really happen in the clinical setting. So as to summarize, the need for application is definitely there because there is a global public health motivation, there is a personal individual maturity that we have arrived to, and we need to create better data sets to create better algorithms that we have now, and also to have a clinical validation, not a spotty one with, but also a coordinated randomized controlled trial ones. Why? Because this is still fortunately or unfortunately how the clinics at the end of the day are running, and the medical field at the end of the day is able to move. Without RCTs, without credible clinical validations, there cannot be a good progress, and everything will be left in more of a dispersed setting. And this will also perpetuate the research and ameliorate the sampling methods that are also still quite spotty, and the availability and access to the test. So also the accessibility, and here also a point of equality. And last but not least, we need coordinated efforts. As one of the example that I would like to mention is oncology, or the field that is newly developed that I am very passionate about, the geroncology, so the oncology of the oldest old cancer patients, where we have almost zero guidelines, but at the same time, we know that this is exactly the part of the population that is at the most risk to develop cancer, because age or old age is the #1 risk factor to develop cancer. And the incidence is now already around 60% of those who are over 65 years of age, and this will only be growing. And another reason for why oncology is so interesting and important in this setting of biomarkers is because there is just so many pathways that are parallel or interconnected between senescence and oncology. And last but not least, it is extremely important because oncology is associated with therapies that are usually causing something that is related to aging. Namely, very often we don't know that the patient is frail or at the edge of frailty. And then one destabilizing event, such as chemotherapy or radiotherapy, can bring the patient from a state of apparently healthy and young to frail, although chronologically young. So there is a big need of good biomarkers in oncology or in geroncology, and we have seen already in studies previously that that patients who have undergone oncological treatment are actually at a higher biological age after that, because they have damages that that were at the level of the hallmarks of aging that are accelerating it. And there are some very preliminary advancements in that field to find biomarkers. For example, P16 made some of highlines, but we are still in children's shoes, as we would say. And we know that the amount of biomarkers is, of course, growing. So there were efforts in the teams already in 2012, 2015 to somehow categorize them and bring them to some clinical translation. These efforts were still very preliminary, but quite good in my opinion, because they were trying to disperse the biomarkers into disease fields so that the clinicians could use this classification and apply it based on what we do in the clinic. And what we do in the clinic is basically looking at the ICD code and at the patient, and then by the coding, we can actually move and act. But there are challenges, and the challenges are definitely some of the typical ones. So lack of validation in very old people, because those are not included in the trials. There is a poor comparability and then poor way of pulling the data. And last but not least, it is very challenging. And there was also even a question by the authors: is it really useful to have some sort of a healthy aging score? Would it be useful? Well, several years after, we saw that yes, it would be, and today we have many more biomarkers of aging. This is pretty much the standard that doctors are looking up for. It's the list of AFAR's biomarkers of aging today, both listed on the website. But as we can see here, those are not exactly directly translatable to the clinic. And then we look at some of our other colleagues' work, for example, for Alexey Moskalev, where we see a huge abundance of biomarkers today. When we zoom it in, we see that here we have biomarkers that are still, measurable to some extent by the great progress of startups and companies that are making them available, but they are by far not the day-to-day life in regular clinics. And what is very important is also to remember that biomarkers of aging also include other measurements besides of blood. So we have an abundance of signs, vital signs, and other measurements that are important. And those are being measured in a much higher frequency. Optimally, as a longevity physician, I want to see my patient having a 24 hours monitoring of blood pressure, pulse, and so on. So how do we implement that as a biomarker into our algorithm and keep it together in the clinic? Also markers such as peak expiratory flow that are quite subjective. So how do we actually find solutions that will give us at least some sort of sensitive outcome that will be then longitudinally trackable? So surely AI will help us in that, and in the field of longevity medicine, AI-powered tools will help us to generate objective functions and actual answers to questions. And also in longevity medicine, we are looking at the aging at different levels. So this is giving us some sort also of order on where we put our biomarkers to, and then select those that we can apply in the clinic. So, So what is happening now, for example, in the centers that I work in human longevity, we are collecting around 150 gigabytes of data of every single assumably healthy patient who just came for the clinic. And this includes also precision imaging. This includes also multi-targeted body functionality, and of course, the entire multi-omics. And all those biomarkers are being collected and being stored. Some of them immediately have some output and actionable items are being developed for the patient, but some of them are not. But the real value in collecting all those data is, of course, as we know, the further learning. What is happening immediately is something that, for example, I do with my patients, is developing a longevity protocol that is applicable for that patient and is very individualized. And where are the biomarkers fitting in here? This is, for example, a granular schedule where different frequencies for different modalities of testing are being prepared for the patient. And this is, of course, evaluated and re-evaluated very frequently to obtain longitudinal data that are needed, and also for events that are needed at a specific time. And we are more and more also looking at some new biomarkers of brain age and cognition. And this is how we are proceeding then with diagnostics and monitoring to reversely collect more and more data to fuel our algorithms and give even better predictions. And just as a last example, I personally also, and there is no interest of commercial whatsoever, but I like to use deep aging clocks for the short-term monitoring of a patient, because this is giving me quite an immediate output of what I can do and what I have done for the patient in terms of getting them biologically younger and reverse their biological age. So this is an example of a patient who was presumably healthy and started own regime of NAD boosters and metformin and rapamycin. Typical patient who is young, in his 40s, very athletic, but unfortunately without a guidance. And what he has done actually in his own manipulation was to make him biologically older. Why? Because we know now, and this is what we also learned reversely using those deep aging clocks, which parameters are being overexpressed or being damaged in the body by an overuse on some of the current available geroprotectors. The same we see also for example, these young females that are biologically older and have reproductive challenges, where we then have to study and look further on which of the parameters besides of the blood and their interrelations are actually working. And this is how it all comes together. So the patient is collecting data, him or herself at home. There is a lot of markers that are being updated and checked regularly by myself or other colleagues. And then, of course, there is a protocol of medication and protocol of collecting new biomarkers and screening to, at the end of the day, quantifiably see if we are successful or not. And at this moment, of course, we are using different clocks, but here it's very nicely seen that this patient, for example, has aged chronologically, over 3 years, but biologically we have kept him at the same level. So it will not be only a subjective feedback of the patient that he feels better, looks better, and so on, which is very flattering and great, but this is a quantitative, objective measurement of a real success or failure of the longevity protocol that the patient is on. All right, I hope I didn't go too much over time. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions after.
Our pleasure, Dr. Bischof. Yes, I found your presentation both deeply insightful and broadly applicable, which is a fairly hard dual optima to juggle and to maximize. And I must say a very high degree of alignment between our group's thoughts on challenges and opportunities and your own, especially as it pertains to the need for multimodal biomarker data and the fundamentally necessary as opposed to complementary role that AI has to play. So thank you very much. And anybody who has questions, please pop those into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'd be happy to cover them during the panel discussion.